So good evening, everybody. We are continuing in chapter 41. We left off in the middle of page Nun Zayin, which is in the middle of the chapter 41. The Alter Rebbe, it's pretty much in the center of the page. V'hinei. Af mi shegam b'meichei machshavtei eine margish shumiru busho. The Rebbe speaks about the importance of Yira Shemayim, Kabbalas Eil, accepting the yoke of Hashem, in this very pedic, that this becomes the basis and the predication of our entire Avodas Hashem. Meaning, even though the Alter Rebbe is explained in the previous chapters, different levels of Ava, love to Hashem, passionate in our Avodas Hashem, different levels of love and different levels of fear. The significance of love and fear in our Avodas Hashem at the beginning of chapter Mem Aleph, the Alter Rebbe begins Beram. However, we have to know that this is the Reishis Haved, at the beginning of our servitude, the Ikra, the Shorsha, the root, has to be ultimately about Kabbalas Eil. We are subject to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we need to submit ourselves primarily to HaKadosh Baruch Hu before we even introduce our sensation, and before we introduce our passion, our different levels of emotional expressions in our service to God. It ought to be based on the notion that Hashem is a melech, Hashem is a king, we are a subject, and everything has to be based again on that basic Yiras Hashem, fear of God, and so on. So the previous classes, the understanding of what the Alter Rebbe's message is in this very chapter in Perek Mem Aleph up to this point, you could find on the koshertube.com or precisely on that, or on the tanyaonline.com, which has precisely these lessons, the lessons in Tanya, very clearly divided and easy, with a scroll bar as well, easy to access every single chapter for that matter, for the very beginning of Tanya. So here you can understand this. If you look in the last few classes, you understand, you can appreciate the Alter Rebbe's message. The Alter Rebbe says, in today's class, he speaks about what if someone doesn't have, he can't evoke this sensation of fear, this sensation of busha, shame, or fear, naturally shame in the context of standing or appreciating that we're always in the presence of Melech Malchem Lachem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the King of all kings. He cannot evoke that. So if you recall in the previous class, the Alter Rebbe says there's the sensation of fear, and then there is that structured appreciation, which could be aroused. Even someone does not have the feeling of the fear, but nonetheless, someone could establish it in their mind. And here the Alter Rebbe says, what if somebody cannot even appreciate it in their mind? The Alter Rebbe goes on over here, step by step, to look at the realistic approach of that individual who is on that conveyor belt, as we call it sometimes, of service, Avodas Hashem. He's on the arena of Avodas Hashem. As we mentioned many times, everything has to be done even when someone is serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or sometimes primarily when he's serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I say even he's ready to submit himself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything has to be done, expressed be'emes lamite, with truth. And the Alter Rebbe can't just come and suggest that fear is the Reishis Haveda if I don't have the sensation of fear. So the Alter Rebbe says in the last week's class, or the previous class, the Alter Rebbe begins with a sensation of fear, which it's not. The Alter Rebbe says really, you ponder a moment of what's really happening, that we're truly always in the face of Hashem standing. Hashem is standing truly over us, in front of us, scrutinizing, examining and scrutinizing our heart, our intestines, everything about us, to see if we're truly serving Him appropriately. That itself should truly arouse the sensation of fears, meaning say the passionate fear, the feeling of fear. The Alter Rebbe says, what if somebody does not have that feeling for whatever reason? So then he could formulate that in his mind, the appreciation of this, of these realities of the Melech HaKadosh Baruch Hu standing in front of him. That itself should, at least in a structure, he doesn't have the feeling of fear, but at least in sort of a structured Yiras Hashem, there should be. And here the Alter Rebbe today says, that even in his structured mind, I say in the mind everything is more structured, it's less a feeling, it's less a sensation, because mind is cold, cool, and calm, and that is the virtue of mind, that it could take and look at things as they are. The virtue of heart is that you get involved passionately in a matter. So there the Alter Rebbe began that it could be demanded, and if a person really ponders what's really going on in his relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, he could evoke this feeling, this passionate sensation of fear. But then the Alter Rebbe says, let's be realistic. Sometimes, certain moments, certain people cannot evoke that passion. At least in their mind, they could establish this yiru busha, this fear, this reverence of Hashem. The Alter Rebbe begins today, and it says, what if someone, even in his meiche machshavte, he cannot establish, and why should it be so? Apparently, even in someone's mind, he cannot establish this yiras Hashem, this yiru busha in front of Melech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why so? The Alter Rebbe says, as we mentioned again, you could see this in the second chapter. We discussed it a few times, but namely, the Alter Rebbe elaborates in the second chapter that certain neshamas, as they journey down to this Eilam Hazeh, they're impacted by different elements or different worlds, the lashon of the Alter Rebbe there, especially the inferior, the lower worlds, which have an impact on the purity and the sincerity and the purity and the earnestness of the neshama, which is by definition a chelik of a kamimal, a part of a Kodesh Baruch Hu himself, and therefore every realistic divine sensation which is expected of every yid is inherent within the neshama because it's a part of God. So everything which is the Ratzon Hashem, everything which is part of this plan, which is demanded of the yid to fulfill in this very world, in his mission of living a life of Torah and mitzvahs, is inherent within the neshama. The only thing is, again, you can see it there in chapter 2, easy to access any chapters we mentioned on this website, TanyaOnline.com. You can see it again in elaboration, as the Alter Rebbe says, yes, every neshama begins as a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but there's certain neshamas are more impacted as they travel, as they journey through world after world, and every world has its, again, particularly the inferior worlds, which what makes them inferior is simply the fact that they don't demonstrate the truth and the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like the Gemara says, Olam is Melashon Helam v'Hester, it covers up, it conceals on the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the lower the world, the more the Helam, the more the concealment. So when the neshama travels through these worlds till it would come down to this world, certain neshamas are more impacted by this journey. And therefore it minimizes, diffuses its sensitivity to the divine. For example, Moshe Rabbeinu, as Alter Rebbe says there in Perek Beis, Moshe Rabbeinu, as an example, again, of all the tzaddikim and Rashi Yisrael Shabbadedim, like the Alter Rebbe, the lashon of the Alter Rebbe, the expression of the Alter Rebbe in the second chapter, just as an example, today's Pesach Sheni, Moshe Rabbeinu, the classic example of Moshe Rabbeinu's total sensitivity to the divine is when the Jewish people came over to him and said, we want to do the Korban Pesach, Lama Nigara, why are we different? Why can't we do the Korban Pesach? In other words, they were adamant to do the Korban Pesach. The Gemara says who they were. They were Tmeim L'Nefesh Adam because they did something noble, but nonetheless they could not fathom that they were not able to sacrifice the Korban Pesach, and they were adamant, they were determined, we want to be part of it. So they turned to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu with the request, the famous expression Lamani Gara, why should we be different, etc., even though they themselves came up with their own answer, because Tmei L'Nefesh Adam were impure. But they couldn't fathom the idea that they would not sacrifice the Korban Pesach. And Moshe says, just a moment, Im Deveshma turns to God and says, God, we got a problem with these good people. Again, the Gemara says that they weren't people who were just loosely tamei, impure. It was because they were involved in the bodies of Nadav Avihu and so on. But Moshe Rabbeinu turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or he tells the people, Imdu, just a moment, the Eshma Mashima Yitzav Hashem, what the Eibush is going to command. He turns to Hashem, and Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu immediately about that mitzvah Pesach Sheni. Yes, we'll give them another chance. Rashi writes, Ashri, based on the Gemara, Ashri Yuludisha. Fortunate is somebody who is born in a very natural birth, a father and mother, that he has the ability and the accessibility to the divine. And this is one of the classic cases, which you see so potently, and the message is so potent, of Moshe Rabbeinu's, the clarity he had, that sensitivity to the divine, even though Moshe Kibbutz Torah Sinai, and he was constantly in contact and constantly in engaging in this dialogue with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, engaging in this with this unique relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for he was the transmitter of Torah, and he was Moshe Rabbeinu. But the expression Ashrei Yuludisha, interesting, is in this parsha because it's so stark. It's so stark that Moshe Rabbeinu says, just a moment, I got to ask Hashem, and a whole new mitzvah comes up. This becomes part of the package of the 613 mitzvah. There was till then 612. Obviously, in Hashem's mind, there was the other mitzvah, but Hashem wanted to, as it says that the Hashem sometimes waits for the meritorious to extract the merit. This which is meritorious. Now, the people who are meritorious to elicit this which is meritorious on its own, and Hashem was waiting for the Jewish people's determination, and he appreciated the Jews' determination not to just leave things as status quo. Okay, we're tummy, let's move on. But Hashem appreciated that the Jewish people were determined, or this group was determined to sacrifice the Korban Pesach. But again, getting back to Moshe Rabbeinu, this is where the Gemara says Asheri Yulud Isha, because it was so clear, it was so stark. It was just in a moment. Imdu, he says, just a moment, let me just ask Hashem what he has in store for you. And he turns to Hashem, and Hashem immediately gives him a mitzvah. Really? I mean, this is just in moments. So you see how Moshe Rabbeinu, despite his neshama, also journeyed into this world for the simple reason. Moshe Rabbeinu was born to father and mother in this very physical world, with a physical body, but he wasn't impacted on the journey, with his journey, by this journey. He was not impacted. The way Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama is a chelik l'kamimal, it's part of a HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the way Moshe Rabbeinu functions in this very physical world, with, again, a soul invested in a body, because he wasn't impacted by the different elements and different worlds where Moshe Rabbeinu also journeyed through in order to come down into this world, but he wasn't impacted at all. Hence, he's constantly sensitive to the divine. Most of the neshamas are impacted. That's why we don't have that sensitivity to alakus, to godliness, like Moshe Rabbeinu. We can extract it more and more, taking away the layers of hell, of the hester, of the concealment of Eilamis, or of this very physical world, and so on, as we work in our Avodas Hashem, and we know that Hashem is always there to assist us when we are determined to take away these layers which conceal over the realities of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but not, certainly not as it was gifted to Moshe Rabbeinu. Or Moshe Rabbeinu, again, as a tzaddik, was not impacted at all. We are impacted. Yet, within that impacted, obviously there's endless levels of how a neshama would be impacted. How the difference of one neshama to another neshama. There's endless differences, as we can all appreciate, because every neshama made the same journey, and a certain neshama was impacted so much, and certain neshamas were impacted in so much, meaning to say some more, some less. So Alter Rebbe says, if a yid within this physical world cannot even establish within his mind, in his meiche machshavte, not a passion of fear, not a sensational fear, but even in his mind, he can't structure a yiru busha, a certain fear of the reverence and reverence, arouse the reverence of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, is primarily not necessarily because he's a bad person. It's because of the way he was additionally impacted as his neshama descended into this world, and namely impacted by the more inferior olamos, particularly Olam HaAsiyah, as the Alter Rebbe writes there, there's Olam HaAsiyah Ruchnis, the spiritual Olam HaAsiyah, but nonetheless, Olam HaAsiyah, an inferior world, it is, it remains, and then there is in every single Olam, there's the Yud Sfiras, the 10 Sfirot, which exist within every single world, and every level impacts the Neshama in a different way, and if it's an inferior world, hence the Sfiras don't carry the same godly message as the world beyond it, and so on and so forth. Hence the impact, the negative impact, is that much greater. So it could be that a neshama, even again innately, in essence, it's a chelik of the kamimal, and it should at least have the ability, in the easy ability to appreciate this yira, this reverence, this fear, this awe of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at least structurally in its mind. Yet it cannot easily access that structured yira ubusha because of pchisas erech nafshi, from where it was carved, mimadreges tachtenis the Yitzviras Asiya, from the lower levels of the 10 sfirat of this lowest, most inferior world of Asiya. And again, there's many, and the Alter Rebbe writes, infinite amount of worlds, but generally they're compartmentalized in Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, Asiya. Atzilus the highest, the Neshama hence coming from the Chachma Ilah, the supreme wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the Chachma of Atzilus, where Atzilus is a Eilam, a world which hosts the Ein Sof, and the Neshama journeys through Bria, Yitzira, Asiya again being the lowest, more the lower. We're obviously not talking about stories over here. This floor, the higher floor, what makes when we speak about higher and lower, it's obvious, not in proximity, not in physical height. It's just a world which demonstrates the Hashem Echad more, or the way Atzilus demonstrates Hashem Echad, the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As we mentioned, Atzilus is Etzle v'Samuch. That's why it's called Atzilus. A few reasons why it's called Atzilus. It's a world which hosts the Ein Sof, hence the message of Einod Milvade, the message of Hashem Echad is obvious, is tangible there, is palpable there in the world of Atzilus, as opposed to as a lower world does not demonstrate that very message. That's why it's an inferior world. The Eilam of it, the thickness, so to say, the Helen Behester, the concealment of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is yet more stark, yet more obvious in the lower world, and as such that itself makes it an inferior world, and so on. Bria, Yitzira, Asiya. So this neshama, as it journeys through the Olam Asiya, is more impacted of the Helavashta, of the concealment of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is represented in this inferior world. And therefore, because of its impact, it doesn't have the ability to even, again, but meiche machshavte, not the sensation of yira, but meiche machshavte, even a structured yira busha, it doesn't have the ability to be sensitive to. And therefore, apparently, how do you tell a person that the reish is Aveda Vikir V'Sharsha, that the beginning of your Aveda, the root of the Aveda, the base of the Shem, it needs to be Yiras Hashem, that he can't even formulate a Yiras Hashem, even B'Meichem Machshavte, even in his mind, even in his thought. The Rebbe says, nonetheless, even such a Yid, because he has in his intent in his service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. His intent in his service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ultimately to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Melech, the King. It ultimately remains a complete and uncompromised Aveda service. Meaning to say, what Alter Rebbe is getting over here is that ultimately Yira and Aveda are two distinct mitzvahs. And because this person appreciates at least the notion of servitude, the notion of the fact that Hashem is a king, and we are his subjects, we are his avodim, and therefore his establishment is an avodah Hashem. Yes, Hashem is a melech and I'm an eved, and therefore I will do what Hashem tells me to do. So despite that there's no sensation of yira, and despite there's a fear of awe, of reverence, despite there's not even a structured yira, ubusha, and ema in my mind, in my meich machshavte, in my intellectual yira, meaning to say I can't even appreciate it in a structured meich machshavte pattern as well. But nonetheless, in the end of the day, am I serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Am I doing what it says in Shulchan Aruch? And the reason why I'm doing what it says in Shulchan Aruch, or I want to do, and I get onto that arena of Avedas Hashem, there's only one reason why I'm doing it, because I do have some appreciation that Hashem is a king, and we're his avadim, we're his servants, and as such, we ought to serve our melech. We ought to submit ourselves to our melech. That is a notion of avodah, of servitude, as we mentioned. It's not yira. There's no feeling. There's no established reverence, there's no established awe, again, not in heart, not in mind, but ultimately I do have appreciation. My intent in my avodah, in my service, is ultimately to serve the king. Hence this makes this avodah gemura an uncompromised, complete avodah, complete service. Because fear and service and servitude in Torah are two distinct mitzvahs. One says, the one pasuk is v'yareisem Hashem Elokecha, that you ought to fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and another pasuk it says v'avadetem es Hashem Elokecha, that you should serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we see over here that they are two distinct mitzvahs, and hence they're not dependent in each other. And therefore, this yid which cannot arouse any level, any sort of yira, of fear, of reverence, nonetheless his service is a complete service. The Alter Rebbe calls it Avodah Gemura. It's a complete service because ultimately his kavanah, his intent in the Avodas Hashem is kidei la'avodas hamelech, is in order to serve the king, and therefore, and because yira and avodah are two distinct mitzvahs, and they're not dependent one on each other, and therefore his avodah, ultimately, again, the lashon of the Alter Rebbe, it's gemura, it's a complete and remains a complete avodah. Then the Alter Rebbe says that at the end of the day, v'aid, additional to what I'm just telling you over here, and the reason the Alter Rebbe is saying v'aid is because what happens to the yira? Does it mean that the person has a mitzvah in front of him, that he has no accessibility to that mitzvah? By definition, can't be. That's a simple reason why the Alter Rebbe says, let's hold on, let's not go away from Yira. Could we say that this person has no connection to Yiras Hashem? There's no connection to the simple, basic fear of God? You cannot negate it, which means the Alter Rebbe says, till now he says, before even you want to cancel the Yid's connection to Yiras Hashem for the reasons we just gave, and the fact and the reality that he cannot even structure any type of Yiras Hashem, again, in a very clear, structured manner, his meiche machshavte in his mind, and his intellectually, and machshavte, and in his mind. So, first of all, I want to tell you that let's not cancel this person out, because in the end of the day, he is an Eved Hashem. And if Avadat Hashem Lekechem is not V'Yireisem Hashem Lekecha, this is two separate mitzvahs. One is about Aveda, which this person again is clear, and it's very obvious and indicative that this person is an Eved Hashem. He's someone who serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But then Alter Rebbe, and therefore even if it doesn't have any overt, apparent, type of Yiras Hashem, or any type of Yiras Hashem overtly not in his heart and not in his mind, nonetheless he is an Eved Hashem. He's serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, again based on the Avadetem, the mitzvah Avadetem is Hashem Alekechem. The Alter Rebbe says, in the end of the day, let's not totally remove this person, formally remove this person from his connection, and perhaps even his innate connection to Yiras Hashem. I say innate connection at the end of the day, because the Yid is a chelik l'kamimal, a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's lashon Alter Rebbe in this very chapter, that in the end of the day, everything which is Ratzon Hashem, everything which is Hashem desires, is embedded within the neshama, because the neshama is a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Whatever is Ratzon Hashem is the Ratzon of the neshama. So inevitably, the neshama, every neshama, has the ability to execute every single dimension of Avodas Hashem which is demanded from it, even this which is associated with a feeling, as opposed to putting up a mezuzah. Obviously, everybody can do. Everybody has the freedom of choice to do. But when it comes to a feeling, then you can say, does he have the feeling or he doesn't have the feeling? But the Alter Rebbe again later says that even things which are a little more subtle, a little more delicate, it is inevitably part and parcel, or inevitably the part and parcel of the neshama means the neshama has the inevitable. It's inevitable. The neshama has the ability to execute even these subtle types of expression in our Avodas Hashem, because the neshama is a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'chol ma sheratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes everything which is the desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes the ratzon of the neshama. So the Alter Rebbe says, let's not take away the Yiras Hashem. Again, and on the surface, you can't say that a Yid has no accessibility to a mitzvah, clear mitzvah of the Teved, Eisem Hashem Leikecha. And then Alter Rebbe says, let's look at the reality. The fact is, when a person withholds himself from doing an Aveda, he has a lust, he has a temptation to do a sin, and he says, no, I'm not going to do it. And not only in action, not only in speech, but namely when it comes to thought, when it comes to yira, riyah, shmiyah, the more sensitive struggles which we have, guarding our eyes, hence our thoughts, our ears, and so on. And a person, or truth is, again, it's across the board, action, speech, or thought. And when a person says no to his Yetzer Hara, don't you think for a moment that can we virtually negate any Yiras Hashem in this process? It's impossible. If a person didn't have any fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's no way that he would able to overcome that temptation which is again compelling, not ultimately compelling, but driving him would be the correct word, driving him so forcefully and passionately to do this sin, maybe in action and speech, or even and in thought, namely in thought. So why is he holding himself back? So even though he doesn't have that structured Yiras Hashem, or the sensational Yiras Hashem, but don't you think there's some Yiras Shamayim there? There's some fear of heaven, fear of Hashem? Obviously there is, and that's the reason why he's preventing himself from sinning. And the same thing when it comes to doing a mitzvah. There's always that laid backness, if you will. And the person says, Hashem says I should do the mitzvah. Sure, I'm going to do the mitzvah. So additional to the Aveda that he wants to serve Hashem as a king, there's obviously some Yiras Shamayim, but really with Alter Rebbe is really where it becomes more obvious is when a person has a taiva to do something wrong and he or she holds himself back from doing the wrong. There's no question that there is some spark of Yiras Hashem. For if not, what stopped him to move along with that drive of the Yetzer Hara, which is telling him to do that, speak that, think that, look there, and so on? There must be some Yiras Hashem. So that's what Alter Rebbe's says, continues, V'aid, shebehem is mekayim gam mitzvahs yira. The truth of the matter is that he's also fulfilling this mitzvah. And you see the Lashon Alter Rebbe says mitzvah. The Alter Rebbe cannot accept that a Yid has a mitzvah and he has no access to it. So there is the Yid mitzvah of Yirasem Hashem Alikecha, where the Yid inevitably, as a Jew, has access to this mitzvah, even though it's a very it's inferior level of Yira. But Yira, the fulfillment of the mitzvah of Yira, there's certainly. He is fulfilling ultimately the mitzvah of Yira, but that he draws that fear of God in his thought, in the time when he has that test, that challenge, and he makes the choice, chas v'shalom, not to sin. In that very moment, Al Kalpanim, at least Meir Shamayim, all of the heavenly fear is placed upon him. Al Kalpanim, at least Kemeir Basav Adam, like the fear of a human being of flesh and blood, head yet a simple person, L'pachashen Melech, even someone who's not a king, Hamabit, all of which looks at him, Shanim, Nabavori Malasses, Davar Sheina Hagun, that a person prevents himself from, because of another party, to do something inappropriate, inappropriate in his eyes. This is also called fear. as we know it, this is human nature which exists across the board. Someone who's Jewish, someone pertains to religion, which again to us it's to Yiddishkeit as an example, to Yiddishkeit rather, or someone who doesn't even belong to any religion, which is fine for someone who's not a Jew. But it's across the board. This is this establishment, if you will, which exists within human nature, that a person would not do something what he does in privacy in public, or even when one more party is looking at him. And as we all know it, that when there's another party in presence, we don't do things, we don't say things, we don't do things what we do in privacy. Now, we know as Yidden that there's no such a thing as privacy, because that's a human being looking at you. This is Hashem, the Melech Malchi Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, the King of all kings, as Lashon Al Terebe says, Eim the Mabit Olav. In Hashem Nitzav Olav, Hashem is standing over you, Umabit Olav, and scrutinizing you, literally looking and scrutinizing you to see what your next move will be in speech and action and thought and so on. So there's no such a thing as privacy, but nonetheless, in human nature, it exists that someone would prevent himself to doing it. And we're not talking about something which would harm another person. Obviously, no one's going to rob when people are looking. That a person will be a little more careful, understandably. But even things which are morally incorrect, that will not harm another person, when there's another party at present, a person would prevent himself from doing that. So when you have somebody which has a temptation and a drive to do something which is morally incorrect, that the Torah establishes that it's morally incorrect, and the person prevents himself from doing so, certainly there is some type of yira, some type of fear, at least similar to the fear of another bas of Adam, another human being of flesh and blood. And therefore, so it's obviously not a very profound type of fear. It's not a fear associated with the awe and reverence of a king, any king, and particularly in this case, Melech Malchem Melchem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the King of all kings. It's similar to a fear of one preventing himself from doing something because of the presence of another human being. But fear, it remains. And if a person prevents himself from doing something that Hashem says not to do, for whatever reason, again, similar, just because ultimately, not the point for everybody to say it with any profound Yiras Hashem, but if he stops, he prevents himself from doing this what Hashem says not to do, and ultimately we must say there's some type of fear, at least the fear which exists within the human being, not to do something inappropriate in the presence of another human being. And if he has that, and if there's nobody around at all, and then he still prevents himself from doing this what Hashem says not to do, at least he has that image of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or at least God to him is another party, which he does not want to sin in the face of this other party. So that's a certain discomfort that the person kind of identifies with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at least again in a way of another party. And for that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ready to prevent and override that temptation, that driving temptation. That, by definition, is fear. Meira shamayim, at least kemeira basar v'dam. You definitely, there has to be that this is a certain, again, this discomfort definitely would be identified with fear, that he considers HaKadosh Baruch Hu present, and therefore I will not do this that I'm tempted to do, maybe in action, in speech, or in thought. And this is, the Alter Rebbe says, brings this famous Gemara. As he says, again, Shazuni Kriyira, which is also called fear, like Rabbi Shimon Aisenbach, the famous giant, Rabbi Shimon Aisenbach, as the Gemara brings the story that his Talmidim gathered around him. I believe this was right before his passing. And they were waiting to hear important, sensational words. A few of them he did tell them, famous expression, Rabbi Shimon Aisenbach, the Gemara says, to the shock of his students, of his pupils around him. He didn't know which way they're taking him after he leaves this world, if to Gan Eden or to the opposite, which again, many commentaries deal with that expression of Rabbi Shimon Aisenbach, which was definitely a sensational expression. But one of the things he told them, which they were expecting something so profound. Perhaps again, certain things he told them, but one thing he told them, one thing which was again seems so to be so simple, but nonetheless we could all appreciate the brilliance of a teacher, a master, which wants to give over in a few words a message which would allow the Avodas Hashem, the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to perpetuate into his students and generations to come. Which is again a brilliance which is encapsulated in these few words. Is the words again Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai tells his students at this important time, because, as the commentaries point out, this is again a few words and it seems to be very simple. But what he was telling them is that ultimately, when it comes to service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there is never allowed to be any gaps. Today I feel God, tomorrow not so much. So today I will be the pious Yid, serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, fulfilling the Shulchan Aruch, the dictates in Shulchan Aruch to the T, perfectly in action and speech and thought. Tomorrow I feel a little bit different with my Creator. I don't have that sensation of Yiro and Avo. I will generally be a good Jew, but to the details, as we know, Yiddishkeit is not only the few formal stuff that we do, if it's Yom Kippur or even on a daily basis, the Tefillin, Mezuzah. Yiddishkeit is 24 hours a day. Performance of Yiddishkeit is about 24 hours a day, guarding ourselves in action, speech, and even in thought. And this is where we're dealing not only with a few times a day, but if not only a few thousand times a day, but much, much more than that. It's every millisecond, certain expressions within our Avodas Hashem, as we all know it. We're challenged not only within second challenges, or challenges which is in sandwiched within seconds, or compressed within a second, but more so within milliseconds. Certain decisions are within the millisecond frame, could make us from the tzaddik to the opposite of the tzaddik, again, as the Alter Rebbe explains in the earlier chapters, as we all know it. Did we violate, obviously dealing more with the sensitive faculties which exist within man, for example, his machshava, when it comes to thought, milliseconds make a difference. So the more the person is in tune with the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which he's able to have this sensational ava v'yira, fear and love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, obviously that's the Yid which has the ability to be the perfect Shulchan Aruch Yid, you can say so. Meaning to say that he follows all the details, the small minutiae details which Shulchan Aruch demands from him, again, particularly when it comes to the subtle challenges, namely in thought, because again, he's overwhelmed with God and godliness and his feeling, which again is expressed in his love and his fear to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so he could be the Shulchan Aruch Yid. But what about the next day or the next hour? He doesn't have that sensation. The good Jew will do everything what he has to do, and continue to put on tefillin. You do his Shurei Torah and so on, but is he doing everything what Torah demands? Is he on guard within every 24 hours and within every moment, within every second or millisecond? Lav dafka, not necessarily. This comes Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Again, in those brilliant few words, and he says, it doesn't matter where you're holding with your sensation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It doesn't matter if you have a sensational love, a sensational fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sensational love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You should remember one thing. Shall it be you should have the fear of God like you fear a human being. And just like when a person would prevent himself always, at any given moment, not to do something inappropriate, when a human being is at present, always, at any time, so too he says Hashem is always there. So when it comes, and therefore we ought to be careful and scrupulous with Shulchan Aruch at all times. The only thing is when it comes to a human being, we know, it's very obvious that most of the human beings don't know what we think. So therefore, not necessarily I would stop myself from thinking something which is inappropriate because a human being is in the room. That's because I know that most of the people don't know what I'm thinking. But to speak or to do, at all times I'm careful. Again, healthy human beings are at all times careful. We don't leave our house, or we don't go out to the public without composing ourselves a certain way. Do I know the person who's looking at me? It doesn't matter if I know the person who's looking at me. I go out in a place which nobody knows me, but still there is that another human being is in my presence. We're going to act differently. So when one thing we all know, and we have no doubt that Hashem not only knows what we do or what we speak, Hashem knows perfectly what we think. And again, we understand that there's nothing that we could hide from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that minimal appreciation that Hashem is in our presence, and just like another you, and at least in such an elemental appreciation of that reality, and similar to the prevention of doing anything wrong when another human being is present, that ultimately fills the gaps, so to say, that a person could serve Hashem without interruption 24/7. So obviously when he'll arouse within himself more of a passionate Yiras Hashem and Avos Hashem, it'll enhance his Avodas Hashem, it'll enhance his service to God, but at least he keeps clean throughout, because he has that Meira Shamayim, at least Kemeira Vadbasam Adam. So again, Rabbi Yochanan, in these few words, brilliant, if you will, few words, which he gave over to his Talmidim in this important time, and just because this ultimately keeps a Yid, and he say above problems. Chas v'shalom, never ever to dip into areas, again, even with his machshava, which are inappropriate, this which Hashem demands us to stay away from. And he went on, he says, that a person, we know that, again, the proof is that when a person, God forbid, does sin, he says, there's one thing that I said, I hope no one finds out about it. I hope that this guy came in, wasn't looking, he came into the room, or came into the house, I didn't notice him, but I hope he came in 5 minutes later. I hope he wasn't there 5 minutes before when I did this, which was wrong, because it could have been that he identified with what I did. So there is that, they exist again within every human being, Adam, every single person. When Chas v'Shalom does something wrong, he says, Shalei Ani Adam, I hope that nobody would see me that I'm doing this. And the person has that feeling about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This ultimately is Yira as well. This is ultimately fear. So the Alter Rebbe is getting at, even though, so he says, the first thing he says, because if you don't have that type of Yira Shamayim, not only like we spoke about in the previous classes about that feeling of love, the passionate fear, but even Mameiche Machshavti, even though you cannot structure this fear is a structured fear in your mayach, intellectually, or machshava, and in your machshava and your thought. Nonetheless, the Alter Rebbe begins, you are serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because Avodah and Yirah are two separate mitzvahs, but more so, inevitably, this person ultimately has Yirah Shamayim. And the only thing is, actually, Yirah Tata. Obviously, this is called Yirah Tata, an inferior type of fear. Yirah Chet, and a fear of sin. This comes prior to Chochmasei, to wisdom, which means to a profound appreciation of the reality of God, and which would lead to a supreme Yira, a quality Yira Beishes, a Yira of shame, true shame in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Mishnah says there's Yira Kaidemes L'Chachmasei, and then it says there's Chachma, which is Kaidem L'Yira. So in this context, we have clearly the Yira, which is Kedemis L'Chachmasi, because you're dealing with a very simple basic, elemental type of yira, which is again the yira tata, the yira, inferior yira, the yira of chet, the yira of sin, which comes prior to chachmasei, to a profound appreciation of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is in my presence, which would lead to yira ilah, a supreme yira, which is again yira beishis, a yira of beishis, busha, a real sensation of shame in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is again more of a qualitative yira. The is yira, as the expression is, there is yiras Hashem and there's yiras Hashem. But yira, it is. Have a wonderful night.